I never thought a man could feel so small standing in someone else's house, in someone else's kitchen, staring at someone else's wife. But there I was, 67 years old, a lifetime of experience, a career behind me, and somehow, I had let myself be summoned like a servant into the living room of a man I barely tolerated. It all started with a simple favor. I had known Martin for years, more acquaintances than friends, but I had helped him out when his business went south. I drove his car to the repair shop, lent him money when he needed a deposit, even patched the roof over his garage when a storm tore it apart. I didn't expect anything, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing I had done the right thing. Or at least, that's what I thought. The day it all fell apart began innocuously. Martin called me, voice clipped, something that usually meant trouble. "Frank," he said, "come by the house. I need your help with something." I should have known better. When I arrived, Martin was pacing, his wife, Lillian, sitting on the couch, scrolling on her phone like she had all the time in the world. "Serve my wife or leave," Martin said, without preamble. Just like that, the ultimatum hung in the air like a guillotine ready to drop. I blinked. Did I hear him correctly? "Excuse me?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. I was 67, not a fool. I had seen enough of life to recognize a trap when I walked into it. "Don't make me repeat myself," he said. "Either you do what she wants, or you walk out that door, forever. You're a guest, Frank. Guests follow the rules." And that was the moment I realized something crucial. I had a choice. A real one. I could grovel, pretend I hadn't heard, and serve some man's wife because he thought his wealth gave him power over decency. Or I could do something I hadn't done in years. I could stand up for myself. I grabbed my suitcase from the corner. I had packed lightly, as if leaving was always an option. And with the most deliberate calm I could muster, I said, "Then I'll take my leave." Martin's jaw dropped. Lillian's eyes widened. The audacity of a 67-year-old man refusing a ridiculous order seemed to shatter their entire world. But the real story, the part that would leave everyone speechless, began the very next day. I had spent decades accumulating a modest fortune. Not flashy, not ostentatious, just enough that I could live comfortably without leaning on anyone. Most of it was in real estate, carefully managed, quietly profitable. While Martin and Lillian flaunted wealth they didn't really earn, I had quietly built mine brick by brick, property by property, until I owned a significant portion of the neighborhood they so proudly claimed. After I left that night, suitcase in hand, I made a few calls. Nothing dramatic, just inquiries about properties, deeds, and ownership transfers. By the end of the week, I had quietly purchased the very building Martin and Lillian lived in. I moved fast but silently. No fanfare, no announcements, no gossip. Just deeds, checks, and signatures. By the time Martin realized what had happened, it was too late. The house he thought belonged to him was legally mine. Every mortgage payment, every utility bill, every ounce of rent he paid now went straight into my account. I didn't stop there. I had spent years learning about human psychology as much as I had about finance. And I knew exactly how to make their lives uncomfortable, not by violence, not by cruelty, but by sheer, calculated inconvenience. First, the letters arrived. Official looking, stamped with the seal of the management company that now controlled the building. Notices of rent increases. Notices of mandatory inspections. Notices that the building was under new management and that tenants must comply with updated rules and regulations. Martin thought he could call me, beg, negotiate. But every call was met with calm, polite, and utterly unyielding replies. "I'm afraid the new policy is standard for all tenants," I said. "Please see the notice." Lillian tried to charm me at the door one afternoon, a forced smile and a too-sweet voice. "Frank, we're friends, aren't we? Surely you wouldn't be unreasonable." I smiled back. I'm afraid I'm only unreasonable when people try to control me. You're free to move if you like. She faltered, her facade cracking. That tiny moment of hesitation was the first real victory. Days turned into weeks. Martin and Lillian's arrogance began to crumble under the weight of reality. They couldn't flaunt wealth they didn't control. Their friends whispered behind their backs, noticing the subtle change. The invitations stopped. The phone calls dwindled. And I continued my life, quietly observing the unraveling, taking small, meticulous notes on how people who treat others as disposable eventually face the same disregard. The next stage of my revenge was purely poetic. I arranged for a community event in the neighborhood, a block party celebrating the building's new management and community improvements. Invitations went out to every tenant, every neighbor, every friend who had ever admired Martin and Lillian. I even sent a personal invitation to Martin himself, addressed formally, with a smiley little note, "We hope to see you at the event celebrating your building." The day of the party, I arrived early, not as a guest, but as the host. I oversaw the decorations, the catering, the music, every detail carefully curated to showcase the transformation I had orchestrated. And then, the piece de resistance, when Martin and Lillian arrived, they were expecting casual acknowledgement, maybe a small nod from neighbors. Instead, they were met with polite but pointed greetings, friendly smiles that carried the subtext, "You no longer control this space." People stared. Neighbors whispered. Children ran past, laughing and oblivious to the adult drama unfolding. Every glance, every nod, every small acknowledgement reinforced the truth: Martin and Lillian were no longer masters of their world. I was. The best moment, the one that still brings a quiet smile to my face, came when the local newspaper sent a photographer to cover the event. Martin and Lillian were caught in a candid photo, standing awkwardly near the punch table, trying to maintain dignity that had long since abandoned them. The caption read, "Neighborhood flourishes under new ownership, former residents adapt to change." I almost laughed aloud. Almost. But I didn't. I let it simmer, let the reality settle like snow on a cold morning. By the end of the month, Martin and Lillian had quietly moved out. They rented an apartment across town, smaller, less prestigious, less everything. I kept the building, of course, renting it to families, professionals, and artists who appreciated the space and treated it with respect. I never gloat. That's the beauty of true revenge: it's quiet, unassuming, and infinitely more satisfying because it's complete. Martin and Lillian never saw me as the villain, they only realized they had lost, in every meaningful sense, when it was too late. Even now, sitting in my modest home with my cat curled on my lap and a cup of coffee steaming beside me, I think back to that night when Martin said, "Serve my wife or leave." How easy it would have been to say yes. To bend, to grovel, to pretend that I was less than I was, all for the comfort of keeping up appearances. But I chose my suitcase. And by choosing myself, I reminded the world, and more importantly, myself, that dignity cannot be rented, borrowed, or borrowed from others. It is owned, defended, and cherished, just like the life I had built quietly all those years. And the truth? Seeing Martin and Lillian scramble, watching the arrogance leave their faces as they realized they were not untouchable, watching neighbors and friends acknowledge the new reality, that was worth every silent effort, every check I wrote, every quiet phone call I made behind the scenes. At 67, some people might think life is about winding down, taking it easy, forgiving and forgetting. I say life is about understanding your worth, standing up for yourself, and sometimes, just sometimes, serving the cold, sweet dish of justice that people like Martin and Lillian think they'll never taste. So yes, I chose my suitcase. And what followed? Well, it left everyone speechless. Even me. Because for the first time in decades, I didn't just survive. I triumphed.